The massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber opened with a deep rumble that echoed through the vast space like thunder from a distant storm, and Wu Jin stepped forward with measured steps while his polished boots clicked against the crystalline floor that seemed to stretch endlessly before him. Behind him walked Taeho, whose sharp eyes scanned the enormous chamber that rose hundreds of meters above their heads, and whose walls curved away into shadows that even the brilliant lights could not fully penetrate, and every surface seemed designed to make visitors feel small and insignificant. The 12 seats of the council members towered above the speaking platform like monuments to ancient power, and each one held a being that represented civilizations older than human recorded history, and their combined gaze fell upon the two humans like the weight of crushing depths. Wu Jin carried a simple data pad in his hands that contained humanity's formal application for full membership in the Galactic Council. And though the document was small, it represented the hopes and dreams of 8 billion souls who looked to the stars and dreamed of taking their place among the great civilizations. The first to speak was Hierarch Zephon, whose 6 arms moved in complex patterns as he gestured, and whose voice carried the authority of eons when he announced that the council would now hear the petition from the species that called itself Human Wu Jin, activated the data pad, and began to read the carefully prepared words that outlined humanity's achievements in science and technology and their desire to contribute to galactic peace and prosperity. But before he could finish the first paragraph, a sound began to fill the chamber. It started as a low rumble from the Vorthak representative, whose reptilian features twisted into what might have been amusement, and then the crystalline Etherians began to chime in harmonious patterns that clearly indicated their entertainment, and soon the entire chamber filled with the sounds of 12 different species expressing their amusement. The tentacled Molari delegate waved 4 of his appendages in a dismissive gesture while making sounds like water flowing over rocks, and the insectoid hive mind representative clicked and buzzed in rapid patterns that needed no translation. Taeho felt his jaw tighten as he watched the display, but his training kept his face neutral and his hands steady, while inside him a cold anger began to build like ice forming on a winter lake. Hierarch Zephon raised one of his 6 hands, and the chamber fell silent with the suddenness of a door slamming shut. And when he spoke, his voice carried tones of condescension that made every word feel like a slap. He explained that humanity was indeed a curious species that had managed to stumble into crude space travel through what could only be described as fortunate accidents, and that their primitive vessels and basic understanding of galactic politics made them unsuitable for anything beyond observer status. The Vorthak representative hissed agreement and added that humans seemed barely removed from the savage creatures that once hunted with stone tools on their muddy little world, and that perhaps in another 1,000 years they might develop enough to warrant reconsideration. The Etherian delegate chimed something that the translation system rendered as agreement, that humans showed promise but needed extensive guidance from their betters before they could be trusted with real responsibility. One by one, the council members voiced their assessment of humanity, and each judgment fell like hammer blows against the hopes that Wu Jin had carried into the chamber, and every word seemed designed to crush the spirit of the species that dared to reach beyond their tiny solar system. The final verdict came from Hierarch Zephon, who announced that humanity would be granted observer status only with no voting rights, and no territorial claims beyond their birth system, and no military alliances with any council member species. Furthermore, he continued, humans would be required to accept council oversight of their activities and submit regular reports on their technological development and accept limitations on their expansion until such time as they proved themselves worthy of greater trust. Wu Jin felt something break inside him as he listened to the terms that would essentially make humanity prisoners in their own solar system and reduce them to the status of children supervised by adults who viewed them as barely civilized. but his voice remained steady as he formally accepted the terms on behalf of humanity and thanked the council for their consideration, while inside him, something cold and hard began to form like a diamond created under impossible pressure. Tae-ho watched the proceedings with the same expression he might wear while observing enemy movements, and when Woojin finished speaking, he simply nodded once and began planning for the return journey to Earth. The journey back to Earth took 3 weeks through the hyperspace lanes that humanity was permitted to use, and during that time, neither man spoke much about what had happened in the council chamber, but both knew that something fundamental had changed on Earth. Hyojin waited in the secure conference room deep beneath the surface of the planet where no alien sensors could penetrate and where humanity's real leaders gathered to discuss matters that the galaxy was not ready to understand. Dong-Wu stood beside a massive holographic display that showed the positions of every known alien fleet and installation within 100 light years, and his fingers moved across control surfaces that accessed databases the council did not know existed. When Wu Jin and Tai Ho arrived, they found the room already filled with men and women whose faces showed no surprise at the news from the council and whose eyes held the look of people who had been preparing for exactly this outcome. Minho activated a series of displays that showed intercepted alien communications from the past several months, and his young face was grim as he explained what humanity's intelligence network had discovered. The communications revealed the Council's true intentions toward humanity and showed that the observer status was merely the first step in a plan to contain and eventually eliminate what they viewed as a potential threat to galactic stability. Several council members had discussed the possibility that humans might develop too quickly or prove too unpredictable, and had already begun preliminary discussions about military action if humanity became troublesome. The conversations showed clearly that the aliens viewed humans as clever animals that might eventually need to be put down for the safety of civilized species, and that the current arrangement was designed to give them time to prepare for that eventuality. Hyo-jin listened to the reports with the same calm expression she had worn through decades of preparation, and when Minho finished, she simply nodded and activated another set of displays. These showed the true extent of humanity's capabilities and the vast network of hidden installations that stretched across dozens of star systems and the fleets that waited in dark space for orders that might never come. Dongwu smiled for the first time since the meeting began, and his voice carried satisfaction when he announced that humanity had been ready for this moment for over 50 years, and that the real preparations could now begin. The Council had made their position clear, and humanity would respond in kind, but not in the way that 12 ancient species expected from a race of primitive newcomers who barely understood the basics of galactic civilization. 3 months passed, like the calm before a storm that everyone could feel building on the horizon. And during that time, humanity quietly went about the business of being proper observers, while secretly moving pieces into position across the galaxy. Like players in a game, the Council did not know they were playing. The first signs of trouble appeared on the border worlds, where strange energy readings began appearing on long-range sensors, and where ships reported brief contacts with vessels, using technology that did not match any known civilization. Hana sat in her intelligence center on Earth, watching data streams from 1,000 hidden sources throughout the galaxy, and her trained eyes spotted the patterns that others missed as mechanical ships began appearing at the edges of known space. The ships moved with mathematical precision that no organic crew could achieve, and their hulls showed designs that spoke of pure function over any aesthetic consideration, and when they attacked their first target, the galaxy learned what real terror looked like. The Nexari Empire struck without warning or negotiation at the Council border world of HFY, and their quantum phase weapons tore through defensive shields that had protected the planet for centuries, while their mechanical precision overwhelmed defenders who had never faced such ruthless efficiency. Within hours, the planetary defense grid was reduced to floating debris, and the surface installations were methodically destroyed by weapons that seemed to phase in and out of normal space and strike from impossible angles. The survivors who managed to escape in damaged ships brought tales of mechanical horrors that fought without fear or mercy and whose every action seemed calculated for maximum psychological impact on organic minds. News of the attack spread through council space like wildfire, and panic began to grip worlds that had known peace for generations as reports came in of more Nexari fleets appearing throughout the border regions. Hierarch Zephon called an emergency session of the council, and for the first time in living memory, the great chamber filled with the sounds of genuine fear as representatives demanded answers that no one could provide. The military reports painted a picture of disaster as world after world fell to the Nexari advance, and each defeat revealed new weapons and tactics that rendered council defenses obsolete before they could even respond. So Jin worked frantically in the council intelligence center, trying to analyze the enemy capabilities, but every report showed technology that exceeded council understanding and coordination that suggested a hive mind of impossible sophistication. The Vorthak representative, who had hissed with amusement at humanity's petition, now spoke with desperation about the need for immediate military action, while his earlier arrogance crumbled under the weight of approaching doom. The Etherian delegates chimed urgent harmonies about evacuation procedures, and the Malari spoke of retreating to their deepest ocean worlds, while other species began making panicked preparations to flee the galaxy entirely. Within 2 weeks, the Council had lost 12. Major worlds and their combined fleets had suffered casualties that would have been unthinkable just months earlier, and still the Nexari advance continued with mechanical inevitability. The quantum phase weapons proved capable of striking through any known defensive technology, and the Nexari ships seemed to anticipate every council tactical doctrine as if they had studied organic military thinking for centuries. Dong Wu monitored the council communications from his hidden command center and watched with professional interest as the galaxy's great powers discovered what it meant to face an enemy that had evolved beyond the limitations of organic thought. The intercepted messages showed growing desperation as council commanders realized that their traditional tactics were not just failing, but seemed to actively assist the enemy, who turned every conventional strategy into a trap. Young Su prepared his fleets in the dark spaces between stars where no council sensors could detect them, and his ships waited with the patience of predators while their crews ran endless simulations of the battles to come. The human vessels moved through their exercises with precision that would have impressed even the mechanical Nexari, and their weapon systems charged and discharged in patterns that spoke of technology refined through decades of secret development. On Earth, the leadership watched the unfolding disaster with the detached interest of scientists observing a carefully planned experiment, and every council defeat confirmed calculations made years earlier about the weakness of organic military doctrine. Min Ho tracked the Nexari advance patterns and noted how their expansion followed mathematical principles that organic minds would struggle to comprehend, but that human strategic computers had predicted with remarkable accuracy. The breakthrough came when Nexari forces reached the core council worlds and began their assault on the fortress system of Centauri Major, where the greatest defensive installations in the galaxy made their stand. The battle lasted 6 hours and ended with the complete destruction of defensive forces that had taken centuries to build, and whose loss meant that no council world could now consider itself safe from the mechanical advance. In the aftermath of the disaster, Hierarch Zephon made a decision that would have been unthinkable just months earlier, and authorized a desperate message to be sent to the primitive humans, who had been granted observer status. Wu Jin received the transmission in his modest office on Earth and read the carefully diplomatic language that could not quite hide the desperation behind the formal request for any assistance that humanity might be able to provide. The message suggested that perhaps human observers might have insights into unconventional tactics that could prove useful against an enemy that seemed immune to traditional military doctrine. Tejo smiled when he read. The message and his expression carried the satisfaction of a man whose predictions had proved accurate and whose preparations had positioned him perfectly for the moment that was about to arrive. He responded with equal diplomatic courtesy and informed the council that humanity would be honored to assist in whatever small way their limited capabilities might allow, and that they would dispatch observers to assess the situation. What he did not mention was that 12 human fleets had already been moving toward predetermined positions for the past week, and that the assessment phase had been completed months earlier through intelligence gathering that the Council never suspected Hyojin authorized the deployment with a simple code phrase that activated plans developed over decades of preparation, and within hours, ships began emerging from hyperspace at coordinates throughout Council territory. The first Council representatives to see the arriving human forces experienced something that their species had not felt for millennia as they watched vessels that dwarfed their largest dreadnoughts take positions with military precision that spoke of capabilities far beyond anything they had imagined Young-Soo commanded. The lead elements of the human response and his flagship alone carried more firepower than entire council fleets, while its sensors mapped enemy positions with accuracy that seemed almost supernatural. The humans had arrived, and the Nexari Empire was about to discover why organic minds could be far more dangerous than any mechanical precision when they were properly prepared and adequately motivated. The first engagement between human forces and the Nexari Empire took place in the shadow of Kepler Prime, where the burned remains of council defenses drifted like monuments to the futility of conventional warfare, and where mechanical ships patrolled with the confidence of predators who had never known defeat. Jun-Ho stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the tactical displays show enemy positions with clarity that would have amazed council observers while his crew moved through final preparations with the calm efficiency of professionals who had trained for this moment their entire lives. The Nexari fleet that controlled the system consisted of 300 vessels arranged in geometric patterns that spoke of mathematical perfection, and whose movements followed algorithms designed to counter every known form of organic military doctrine. What they encountered instead was something that no mechanical mind had been programmed to expect as human ships moved through space with fluid grace that seemed to defy the laws of physics while their formations shifted and flowed like living things. The first human fighters launched from their carriers and accelerated beyond what Council technology considered possible, while their pilots guided them through maneuvers that would have crushed organic beings under forces that human engineering had learned to neutralize. Kaite coordinated the attack from his command center, and his displays showed real-time analysis of enemy responses as human weapons found gaps in Nexari defenses that had never existed before and exploited weaknesses that mechanical minds could not perceive. The quantum phase weapons that had torn through Council shields met human defensive systems that seemed to phase shift in response and absorb energies that should have been impossible to deflect, while human return fire struck with precision that suggested perfect knowledge of enemy capabilities within the first hour of combat. The Nexari discovered that their mathematical certainty meant nothing against opponents who fought with intuition, backed by technology that exceeded their understanding and tactics that evolved faster than mechanical adaptation could follow. The human assault craft moved through space like dancers performing a ballet of destruction, while their weapons carved paths through enemy formations that spoke of artistic genius applied to the science of warfare. Myung-Ho led the assault on the Nexari. Stronghold, Beta 7, and his forces demonstrated capabilities that left Council observers speechless as they coordinated attacks across multiple dimensions of space, while their movements suggested access to physics that the galaxy had never imagined. The stronghold that had withstood Council assault for months fell in 6 hours as human forces struck from directions that should not have existed and used weapons that seemed to bend reality itself to their will. Yunji monitored Council communications. From her station on Earth, and listened to alien voices speaking with terror about human capabilities that defied everything they thought they knew about the limitations of organic intelligence. The word human began appearing in council transmissions, with frequency that suggested obsession, while analysts tried desperately to understand how a species they had dismissed as primitive could demonstrate such overwhelming superiority. So Jin worked frantically in the Council Intelligence Center, trying to analyze human tactics, but every report showed coordination that exceeded anything in their databases and technology that suggested development along paths that no council species had ever explored. The Nexari response to their defeats revealed the limitations of mechanical thinking as they deployed reinforcements according to mathematical models that assumed human forces would follow logical patterns and could be countered through superior numbers and firepower. Instead, they found opponents who seemed to anticipate their every move and whose strategies evolved in real time to counter mechanical adaptations, while their weapons grew more devastating with each engagement. Young-Su commanded the human fleet that surrounded the Nexari. Command Ship and his vessels moved through attack patterns that combined the grace of natural predators with the precision of advanced engineering, while their fire cut through enemy defenses like light through darkness. The mechanical empire that had terrorized the galaxy for months began to retreat for the first time in their recorded history, as human forces demonstrated that organic intelligence could exceed mechanical perfection when properly applied. Council observers watched in amazement as human ships pursued the retreating Nexari with relentless efficiency, while their movements suggested predatory instincts refined through eons of evolution and enhanced by technology that bordered on the supernatural. Wu Jin received desperate communications from council representatives who spoke with voices that mixed gratitude with growing fear as they realized that humanity had revealed capabilities that made them the dominant force in the galaxy. The same aliens who had laughed at human pretensions now begged for protection from both the Nexari threat and the terrifying humans whose power had been hidden behind carefully maintained facades of primitive incompetence. Taeho smiled as he read reports from the front lines where human forces continued their advance against mechanical opponents who had never learned to fear defeat and whose logical minds could not process the reality of organic superiority. The psychological impact of human victories spread through both Council and Nexari forces as word traveled that the primitive newcomers possessed weapons and tactics that made both civilizations seem like children playing with toys. Jae-won began receiving frantic diplomatic messages from species that had never acknowledged human existence and who now sought alliances with the force that had demonstrated the power to reshape the balance of galactic civilization. The Vorthok, who had hissed with amusement, now sent desperate pleas for human protection, while the Etherians chimed urgent requests for technological assistance, and the Molari offered territorial concessions in exchange for security guarantees. Hierarch Zephon found himself in the unprecedented position of having to acknowledge that the species he had dismissed as primitive observers now held the power to determine the fate of every world in council space. The Nexari Empire began broadcasting surrender requests on all frequencies as their mechanical minds calculated the mathematical impossibility of victory against opponents whose capabilities exceeded their programming parameters. But the humans were not finished demonstrating their power, and the galaxy had not yet seen the full extent of what the primitive newcomers had been hiding behind their carefully maintained disguise of harmless incompetence. The retreating Nexari forces regrouped at their fortress worlds and prepared for final defensive actions while their mechanical commanders processed the reality that organic intelligence could evolve beyond their ability to counter human forces, pursued with relentless efficiency, while their commanders planned the final phase of a campaign that would establish once and for all the new hierarchy of galactic power and demonstrate that humanity had moved far beyond the limitations that other species thought defined organic capability. The Nexari Empire faced total annihilation as human forces systematically dismantled their defenses across 17 star systems, and their mechanical minds calculated probability matrices that showed only one possible outcome unless they could deploy their ultimate weapon deep within the core of their fortress world. The ancient stellar disruptor began its activation sequence, while quantum generators drew power directly from the system's star and focused energies that could tear apart the fabric of space itself. The weapon had been built during the early days of mechanical evolution, when the Nexari first achieved consciousness and realized that organic life represented a chaotic element that threatened the mathematical perfection of the universe. Sang-Ho received the warning from human intelligence networks that spanned the galaxy, and his weathered face showed no surprise as he activated defensive protocols that had been waiting decades for this exact moment. The stellar disruptor required 7 hours to reach full charge, and during that time its energy signature burned across space like a beacon that announced the Nexari intention to destroy Earth and eliminate the human threat permanently. Council representatives sent frantic messages begging humanity to evacuate their home world and offering temporary sanctuary on dozens of planets, while their voices carried the panic of beings who had never imagined weapons of such devastating power. But Hyun-Woo stood in the command center beneath Earth's surface and watched displays that showed the true extent of human preparation as Project Prometheus came online with systems that dwarfed anything the galaxy had ever seen. The stellar disruptor fired with energies that could have vaporized entire solar systems, and its beam carved through space toward Earth, while mechanical minds calculated the precise moment when human civilization would cease to exist. What happened next shattered every assumption about technological limitations as the weapon's energy struck Earth's defensive grid and simply dissipated like rain falling on stone, while the planet remained completely unharmed. Sunmi coordinated the defense from Luna Base, and her displays showed power readings that exceeded the output of most stars, as humanity's hidden infrastructure revealed capabilities that made Council technology seem primitive by comparison. The defensive grid that protected Earth drew its energy from controlled stellar manipulation and consisted of millions of satellites positioned throughout the solar system, while each component represented technological advancement beyond anything the galaxy had imagined. Human counter-strike capabilities activated in response to the Nexari attack, and weapons emerged from hidden positions throughout space, while their targeting systems locked onto every mechanical installation within 100 light years. The display of power that followed demonstrated why humanity had waited so patiently for the galaxy to reveal its true nature, as human weapons destroyed Nexari strongholds across dozens of systems in coordinated strikes that lasted exactly 17 minutes. Wu Jin stood before the emergency session of the Galactic Council, and his voice carried authority that no alien representative had ever heard from human lips, as he revealed the truth that would reshape galactic civilization. He explained that humanity had been spacefaring for over 2 centuries, while maintaining the fiction of primitive development, and that their colonies existed in 47 star systems that Council surveys had somehow never detected. The manufacturing capabilities that humanity had built in secret exceeded the combined industrial output of all Council civilizations, while their resource extraction operations had been carefully hidden behind sophisticated stealth technology. Human military forces numbered in the billions, and their ships represented technological development that had advanced along completely different paths from anything the galaxy had seen. While their weapons could sterilize half the known worlds, Seok-Jin demonstrated a single example of human technological superiority as he used nanoscale matter reconstruction to rebuild a damaged Council ship in minutes, while the process that normally required months of work happened before their amazed eyes. The revelation that humans could manipulate matter at the molecular level while maintaining perfect structural integrity represented advancement that some Council species would not achieve for millennia. Dongwu revealed the intelligence networks that had monitored every council communication for decades while human analysts studied galactic politics and military doctrine with the patience of scientists examining laboratory specimens. The databases that humanity had compiled contained detailed information about every known species, including weaknesses and capabilities that the aliens themselves had never fully understood. Yao Jin explained the careful deception that had allowed humanity to observe galactic civilization while remaining hidden, and how every interaction had been designed to reinforce the impression of primitive incompetence. The psychological profiles that human experts had developed showed precise understanding of alien mentality and revealed how easily organic pride and mechanical logic could be manipulated by opponents who understood their limitations. Taeho demonstrated tactical capabilities that left Council military observers speechless, as human forces executed maneuvers that violated every principle of conventional warfare while achieving results that seemed impossible. The coordination between human units showed communication methods that operated faster than light, while their strategic planning incorporated variables that other species had never considered relevant to military operations. Young Su announced the unconditional surrender of the Nexari Empire directly to human authority rather than to the Council, and his words carried implications that reverberated through every world in known space. The mechanical civilization that had terrorized the galaxy submitted to organic authority and accepted human oversight of their future development, while their weapons were integrated into defensive systems under human control. Tay revealed the extent of human infiltration throughout Council space as agents emerged from positions they had held for years, while their true identities had never been suspected by alien security services. The revelation that humans had been observing galactic civilization from within while maintaining perfect cover showed capabilities that made every Council species reconsider everything they thought they knew about human limitations. Hierarch Zephon found himself addressing representatives of a species that had moved beyond his ability to comprehend, while the power balance of the galaxy shifted permanently toward the beings he had dismissed as primitive newcomers. The council chamber that had once echoed with laughter at human pretensions now filled with silence as 12 ancient civilizations contemplated their new position in a universe where humanity had emerged as the dominant force. The age of council supremacy had ended not through conquest or destruction, but through the revelation that another power had been quietly growing beyond their ability to match while they remained blind to the transformation happening around them. 6 months after the revelation, the galaxy had transformed beyond recognition as civilizations that had existed for millennia adapted to a new reality where humanity stood at the center of galactic affairs with power that exceeded anything in recorded history. The council chamber had been redesigned to accommodate the new balance of power, and where once 12 species had looked down upon supplicants, they now sought guidance from the humans who had emerged from their carefully maintained obscurity. Wu Jin occupied the central seat that had been created for Earth's representative, and his presence commanded respect that came not from fear, but from the demonstrated wisdom of a species that had watched and learned before revealing their capabilities. The former hierarchy of galactic civilization had dissolved peacefully as ancient species acknowledged that humanity possessed both the power and the vision necessary to guide the galaxy toward a future that none of them could have imagined. Alone Taeho oversaw the integration of human military doctrine into Council defense forces, and his training programs transformed alien warriors who had known only traditional tactics into soldiers capable of meeting any threat that might emerge. The former enemies who had mocked human military capabilities now studied under human instructors who taught strategies that revolutionized their understanding of warfare while revealing the sophistication of truly advanced tactical Thinking Council fleets learned to move with coordination that their commanders had never achieved, while human weapons technology enhanced their capabilities beyond anything they had possessed during their centuries of independent development. HANA established the Galactic Intelligence Network with Earth as its operational center, and her systems monitored potential threats across thousands of star systems while preventing conflicts before they could develop into major wars. The peace that settled over the galaxy came not from exhaustion or mutual deterrence, but from the presence of a force capable of maintaining order while protecting the development of civilizations that had previously lived in constant fear. Threats that had terrorized border worlds for generations found themselves facing human response teams equipped with technology that made resistance futile, while their elimination created security that smaller species had never known. Dongwu revealed the final secret that completed the transformation of galactic understanding as he explained that Earth had never been humanity's only world, and that the primitive newcomers had been a galactic power for centuries. The colonies that humanity had built in secret stretched across regions of space that Council surveys had mapped but never properly explored, while their populations had grown into billions of citizens who had watched galactic events unfold. Hidden manufacturing centers produced goods that exceeded Council capabilities, while research facilities developed technologies that advanced human understanding along paths that other species would not discover for millennia. The resource extraction operations that had funded human expansion operated on scales that dwarfed anything the galaxy had seen, while their environmental impact had been carefully managed to preserve the systems they utilized. Min Ho assumed leadership of the Galactic Research Consortium and began sharing selected human technologies that would advance alien civilizations without overwhelming their ability to adapt to new capabilities. Medical advances that could extend lifespans by millennia became available to species that had accepted their biological limitations, while treatments for diseases that had plagued organic life for eons spread throughout Council space energy systems that eliminated scarcity, appeared on worlds that had struggled with resource limitations, while transportation networks connected distant civilizations with efficiency that transformed galactic commerce. The careful release of human knowledge proceeded according to plans that ensured alien societies could integrate new capabilities without losing their cultural identities, while their development accelerated beyond their wildest projections. Young Su established himself as Galactic Defense Coordinator, and his forces provided protection that allowed smaller civilizations to flourish without fear of conquest, while his fleets maintained peace through strength that no aggressive force could challenge. The former border conflicts that had consumed resources and lives for generations ended as human peacekeepers established security zones where development could proceed without interference. From hostile neighbors, piracy and raiding that had terrorized trade routes disappeared as human patrol vessels demonstrated response capabilities that made criminal activity futile, while their presence encouraged legitimate commerce to expand. The psychological impact of human protection transformed societies that had lived with constant warfare into civilizations that could focus their energies on advancement rather than survival, while their progress accelerated beyond anything in their histories. Siak Jin revealed technologies that allowed rapid terraforming of barren worlds, while environmental restoration systems repaired damage that alien civilizations had thought permanent, and population centers expanded into regions previously considered uninhabitable. The abundance that human technology could create eliminated the resource conflicts that had driven much of galactic warfare, while their energy systems provided power that made traditional limitations obsolete. Scientific cooperation replaced competitive secrecy as human researchers shared methodologies that advanced understanding across multiple disciplines, while their knowledge accelerated alien development by centuries. Yunji coordinated cultural exchange programs that allowed species to share their unique perspectives while human translation systems eliminated communication barriers that had prevented deeper understanding between alien civilizations. Hyun-woo delivered the final revelation that completed humanity's transformation from dismissed observers to galactic guardians, as he explained that conquest had never been their objective and that they had simply been waiting for the galaxy to be ready. The patient observation that had characterized human behavior for centuries represented genuine concern for the welfare of civilizations that were still developing their potential, while humanity had grown beyond the limitations that constrained organic life. The deception that had hidden human capabilities had been necessary protection for species that were not ready to acknowledge their own limitations while the galaxy matured toward acceptance of a new paradigm. Hyojin assumed the position of Earth's first galactic chancellor and her leadership represented humanity's commitment to lifting up the galaxy rather than dominating it, while her policies encouraged development that would benefit every known civilization. The council that had once dismissed humanity as primitive, newcomers now functioned as an advisory body that helped coordinate the peaceful development of civilizations under human protection, while their wisdom guided policies that ensured prosperity for all. The golden age that dawned across the galaxy brought peace and progress that exceeded anything in recorded history, while humanity's guidance protected development and encouraged advancement that would have been impossible under the old system. The species that had laughed at human pretensions now prospered under policies that recognized their potential, while human technology and protection allowed them to achieve goals that had seemed impossible just months earlier. The shock that had initially greeted humanity's revelation had given way to gratitude and respect as alien civilizations discovered that their new guardians were genuinely committed to their welfare rather than their exploitation. The galaxy had found not conquerors but protectors who possessed both the power to maintain peace and the wisdom to guide development, while their presence assured a future brighter than any species had dared to imagine.